everyone. How are you? Welcome. I am here with Dr. David G. Harper, as I've been talking about for the last month, I think. And he is the author of BioDiet. I'm going to read it here. The scientifically proven ketogenic way to lose weight and improve your health. So that's why we're here today. Thank you so much for coming on today, Dave.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Leta. We've been chatting for quite a while, and I've been looking forward to this.
Yes, we have. And I have not been able to put your book down. In fact, I've kind of have a few earmarked areas that I've read over and over again and I've actually taken some good notes here. So I'm going to tell you people that are here that I am going to be looking at my notes because I'm not a memorizer, but I want to make sure that, there's certain things that I want to get in. And one of the things that I want to say is, first of all, I want to ask you, how's your book tour going? Because you've been on a book tour.
Yeah, well, we launched the book May 7th, and I was very, very delighted to see it go straight to #1 in some categories on Amazon in Canada.
I knew it in Canada. Yeah, right away, the bestseller, like within the first week, I think.
First day, actually.
My gosh.
For breast cancer, which is my area of research, and also anatomy and physiology, and then anatomy, and then it was on the top 100 new books and in nonfiction. And
oh, wow.
So it's been great. The sort of the physical tour traveling across the country won't be for another couple of weeks yet. I'll be in back east in Montreal, Toronto, I think Hamilton, Calgary, and then some events here. I was just down in
Kamloops at all? Are you coming to our university or anything in Kamloops?
Hey, if you organize it, I'll come for sure. I'd love to come to Kamloops. I love Kamloops. I was just in Bend, Oregon, giving a presentation to a group of biohackers there, and also having a bit of vacation. And it was really fun. It kind of reminded me of Kamloops there a little bit like Kamloops crossed with Whistler a bit. I've been doing a lot of mostly podcasts and radio interviews. I'll be doing some television and stuff in the coming weeks. It's very exciting. I love talking about this. And one of the reasons that my wife and I wrote the book, my wife is the co-author, Dale Drury.
Yeah, she is. And she was at the conference too.
She was, and it's really an advocacy piece because I feel very strongly as a scientist that the information the public's getting about what constitutes a healthy diet is a bit misinformed and not supported by robust science, and that actually the low carbohydrate, high fat diet is one that is probably more suited to most people. And I want to start off by saying, first of all, I'm not a physician. I go by Dr. Harper as a PhD. Right. So I'm not a physician, so I provide health advice, not medical advice. The reason we wrote this book was to explain the science behind a ketogenic diet, because I don't think it's well explained right now in terms that are engaging and approachable. And that's where my wife really helped as a journalist.
Well, because a lot of times I think, we think about it for weight loss, which is fantastic, of course, but the health benefits, that's just so exciting. And that's really your area of research, isn't it?
Yeah, it is in chronic disease. So ketogenic diets for therapeutic benefits for chronic disease. But weight loss is, if you look in the United States, obesity, for example, is considered to be a disease. So if people are overweight or obese, then weight loss is also a therapeutic benefit for a chronic disease. But if weight loss wasn't associated with any health issues, I wouldn't worry about it. But I'm really interested in how ketogenic diets can be used to address cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and these other chronic diseases that are plaguing us.
And I just want to jump in, and I am going to just read this because I memorize it. But Dave, Dr. Harper is just so accomplished, and I just want to read, his credentials, because it for the information that he gives in the book, it just validates everything that he's going to be talking about. So, Dr. David G. Harper, he's a scientist, health educator, associate professor of kinesiology at the University of the Fraser Valley, which, by the way, is my university.
Oh, great.
I went to the one in Abbotsford, for 2 years. And he's a visiting scientist of the BC Cancer Research Centre Terry Fox Lab, a member of the Scientific Advisory Board of the Canadian Clinicians for Therapeutic Nutrition, and a member of the Institute for Personalized Therapeutic Nutrition. So that's a lot. Yeah. But
I wear a lot of hats.
Yes, you do. But it's important for people to know that when you're talking about in this book, what you're talking about. This is what you do. This is what you do.
Yeah, thanks. It's very flattering, and I'm a little bit humbled by all of that. But one should always, accept their accomplishments, I suppose. And I've been working very hard on this in this area for about 10 years now. And so again, I was looking at the information that people were getting. Lots of people have heard about ketogenic diets, tons of them, like almost everybody. Yeah. And even those that haven't say, yeah, I've heard of what keto, what, they don't really understand what it is. And then I always ask them, well, where did you get the information if they've tried a ketogenic diet? And it's also, I just got on the internet. Yeah. And I said, from what source? Oh, I don't know. And I thought, I've been doing clinical trials with participants for about 7 or 8 years now. And we're really careful. We make sure that there's physician oversight because there could be adverse effects, especially during the adaptation phase. There's almost always a need for concomitant reduction of drugs if people are taking drugs for high blood pressure or for high blood sugar. So there's a lot of sort of people are just spouting their opinions, which is the nature of the internet. Anybody can say anything. So what I wanted to do, a lot of the books, there's some great cookbooks out there, some recipe books. There's a lot of books written by some trainers, and they have varying degrees of expertise. And frankly, some of the recommendations there are a bit edgy, as trainers tend to be. They tend to want to push people a little bit. And then there's a lot by physicians, which I always find interesting because physicians, and I have tons of respect for physicians. In fact, the Canadian Clinicians for Therapeutic Nutrition are mostly physicians, but they don't get nutritional training in medical school. Their average in North America is 5 to 8 hours during their 4 years. So is nothing. Yeah, so I thought, there are some really good books. I've been working with Jeff Volek, and I know Steve Finney well, and they've had a book out for more than 10 years. But I felt there's a need. Yeah, he's great. And so I thought it was timely that we get the right information out so that people that are interested in ketogenic diets can find out why it works. So that's the first half of BioDiet, is why it works. Absolutely. And then secondly, how to work with your physician to safely adopt a ketogenic diet so that you reduce any of the symptoms in the adaptation phase, and that you if there's any adverse effects that come up, how to address those. And I really feel that's important to emphasize. People should be doing this with their physicians and a qualified nutritional counselor as well, if possible.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. That's such good points. And that's why I really wanted to bring up your credentials, because you are so qualified to be talking about this. I mean, we, in our support group, we try so hard, but we have difference of opinions. We all study different things. And I think it's really nice to hear from someone who studies that. I mean, this literally, like you said, it's been your life for 10 years. And so it's just really great to hear, especially when it comes to preventing and reversing disease. Is so important. Most of us in the group are 40 plus, a lot of us 50 plus, and we really need to think about things like this. So one of the things I had written down here that I wanted to talk about was before you started getting into this, when everyone was talking about the usual pyramid eating and things like that, what was it for you that was the change? What made you say, wait a minute, what about this? Because you were before this all became very popular. Right now it's popular, but you've been researching this for longer than that. So what was that for you?
That's a great question, Leta, because everybody has their own personal journey, and this is really a lifestyle change, right? One of the key points I want to make is ketogenic diets, despite the pushback we're getting in some of the media, it's not a fad diet, it's not an unhealthy diet, no. But if you're not adapted to fat metabolism, there's some careful consideration you need to take there. So my particular journey, I've been teaching what we call the traditional Western diet, or the conventional wisdom, which was a high carbohydrate, low fat diet, very low, 30% of calories or less from fat, and 10% or less from saturated fat, and mostly carbohydrates. And that's what I've been teaching for 30 plus years to my students in my health courses. And I honestly, even in the book, I said, I have to apologize to you because I told you the wrong stuff. And frankly, I wasn't being a good scientist when I did that, because I never looked at the primary research that supported that. And so the story starts when I had a radio show called Think for Yourself, which is a show about critical reasoning and healthy skepticism. And we would talk about various topics. This was on local community radio here, but it's sort of NPR in the United States. If you have any listeners there, same sort of thing. And and so we had one episode where we were talking about what's the best way to lose weight. Is it in the kitchen with food, or is it in the gym with exercise? And I'm a kinesiology professor. That's one of my hats. So I was taking the role of the, exercise is the way to lose weight.
Right.
And we had
so we all work out at the gym really hard.
and hey, I want people to go to the gym, work out really hard, but not to lose weight. And so Dr. Richard Mathias from he's a physician and a PhD from the UBC School of Public Health was there, and he studied traditional First Nations diets, which are ketogenic. And so, we were talking on the show about, he asked me, what do you think is the cause of obesity? And I gave the sort of party line at the time. This is more than 10 years ago, well, it's a multifactorial problem that has psychosocial factors and metabolic issues and to do with mobility and to do with exercise. And he just sort of looked at me and he waited till I was finished. He said, Dave, it's much simpler than that. It's a physiological adaptation to excess carbohydrate in the diet. And we on radio, we call it dead air. I was just speechless. I just thought,
silence.
I've been teaching this stuff for 35 years, but my field in teaching is anatomy, physiology, pathology, and I understand all the mechanisms to that level. And everything just clicked all at once. And I thought, of course, it actually probably is that simple. And so the whole discussion changed. And I left that interview a changed person, and I went and I thought, well, I have to go and, I have to go and find this research that was supporting the conventional diet. That fats are bad for you and saturated fats cause heart disease, and we need to have, it's just not there, Leta. It's not there. No. It was a hypothesis brought forward by Ansel Keys in the 60s and never proven.
I read that whole thing about Ansel Keys, and it's just so funny how things just spiral, and they take this one thing and then they base everything on this one thing, and it was flawed from the beginning.
I know. And I don't know what kind of organization you work in, but how many times have you been at a meeting where somebody says, oh, we just need a policy. Let's just go with this now. And if it doesn't work, we'll fix it later. And I kind of feel like that's what they did. They said, well, this seems right. Like if you're overweight, that's too many calories, fat provide the most calories. So it must be too much fat. And, fat is what we find in this atherosclerotic plaques in the cardiovascular system. And that's what causes heart disease. So it must all be about fat. And it all made sense. But that's just a hypothesis in science. That's not a theory.
Exactly.
In order to turn it into, so when I went to see what the evidence was, it's just not there. Now, it's not that they didn't look for it. In the United States, they spent more than $2 billion in adjusted dollars over 30 years trying to prove that saturated fats caused cardiovascular disease, and they came up empty. Every study came up empty. Yeah. In fact, saturated fats, marginally have no effect, but some saturated fats, for instance, in dairy, have been shown to actually be cardioprotective. They're actually good for your heart. So that was the first thing I found, was that there is no evidence that saturated fat, there's no robust scientific evidence. There are all kinds of these epidemiological studies where they do surveys and ask you what you ate a year ago, and you fill these things out, and they make these correlational graphs, and there's the famous, now much debunked Ansel Keys 7 countries study, where he conveniently left out the countries that had high saturated fat diets and low cardiovascular disease because they didn't fit his line. And so
I read about that. Yes.
Yeah. So then I said, well, what's the alternative? And the paleo thing has been around for a while. And I looked at that and I thought, well, I'm a biologist. That's my training. So what are humans designed to actually eat? What's a diet for us? And clearly, in our hunter-gatherer days, hominids have been around for a couple of million years, and Homo sapiens for at least a couple of 100,000 years. And we existed all that time and evolved quite happily all that time without carbohydrate in our diet in any appreciable manner. Amount.
So true.
And it's only since agriculture that we started, and we needed agriculture when we were living in communities where we had division of labor and people had to have foods that provided calories that they could store and travel with, and grains provided that. But I would argue that they're not a natural human food, and we certainly shouldn't be encouraging people to eat a quarter of their calories per day from grains, and call that a healthy diet, as we are in the Canada Food Guide that's just come out.
Well, and even on top of that, there's so many people that have inflammatory issues with grains. I mean, I'm one of those people. I mean, if I maybe a one-off here and there, and I'm okay, but if I go more than one situational meal that has grains, I pay for it. I mean, I can feel it immediately, but I've also been, grain free for quite a long time, so I notice it. But when people eat this all the time, every single day, they don't realize how they're feeling. I'm just gonna, sorry to be distracted a little bit, but I just saw some people commenting that you're just saying that they couldn't see the live. So I'm just gonna look on here, because I know it was all set up ahead of time. And I'm just trying to see, I don't know if any of you guys, I see two people. No, that was me. Yeah. I just want to make, if there's anybody if they're watching, which I think that it says there's X amount of people, but I just can't see the comments. So maybe you could comment.
I can see a team chat here on my end.
Oh, there we go. I think sometimes there's a little bit of a delay when it comes out. I mean, we've been talking here for 15 minutes or whatever, but I can see that, two people have commented and they are in the group. So I know that. So it's in there. Okay, if anybody can tell, if you're watching, maybe someone could post in the group, because I really can't do it right now, but just post in the group. I can see live. Hi, Eric. Maybe you could just post in there that if they go, I mean, all they have to, it should be just sitting right there, and they should just be able to click on it. So I think there was just a bit of a delay. Anyway, so sorry, Dave. You're on a really good roll there. I'll let you continue where you were saying. You were talking about.
We were just talking about the Canada Food Guide and grains, and you meant that you had some inflammatory issues with that. Very common. Sure. That's
the next day. The very next day. My left knee has always been a bit of an issue. Like, I thought I needed knee surgery, actually, just a little bit backstory there, but I really thought I needed knee surgery, and I had just slight, like, arthritic-y kind of feeling or whatever, and it's completely gone. I don't need knee surgery. I don't have arthritis, and I don't feel achy or anything. But if I have that one meal, like, say, on vacation or whatever, and the food's really good, you're like, whatever. And so you do it, and that's fine. I know I'll pay for it, and do I ever? And it probably takes me about a full week to get fully back to where I was before. So
yeah, that's there's only a couple of times where I've just said, well, I'll try a piece of pizza or a croissant and see what happens, and it's fine when I eat it, but the next day I hurt, so
that find that it's not even really that good. Like, that's what I always tell myself, I'm going to treat myself, and I have this thing, and then even as I'm eating it, I'm going, okay, I could have totally just ate the topping. Like, the bready part is so bland, it doesn't even taste like anything. And now that just gave me X amount of macros or whatever, and I could have spent it on something else. Like, it's not even as enjoyable as I thought it was. I'm like, damn it, why did I do it?
Yeah, I find the same thing. I find it kind of mealy, and the texture just isn't very satisfying, and there's not really any flavor in there anyway. And that's the thing, the way we make grains flavorful is by adding like salt and especially sugar to it. And then people eat it. But I think, once you're keto adapt, and that's the great thing about well-formulated ketogenic diets like the BioDiet is that they are naturally anti-inflammatory, but also they're gluten-free, because you're not eating any grains, and the gliadin protein is in the gluten.
Yes. Yeah. And I just want to say too, just because it seemed like we were talking for a while, maybe people are just, getting on now or whatever, but I just wanted to show again, Dr. Harper's book, BioDiet. Oh, sorry. I can't angle it right.
I can see it.
And if you want more information too, there's a lot of information on his website, which is biodiet.org. And I'm going to put that in the link afterwards when this video gets posted. But there's a lot of really great information there too. And I can't get into the screen.
Yeah, I'll just, when you talk about the website, I'll just mention we actually have, there's a little bit of a preview of the book there. There's a link to Amazon, and if you go to the Amazon link in the Kindle version, you can actually read the first, I can't remember what it is, 50 pages or so of the book. So you get the introduction, you get a feel of how it's laid out. And then we have some resources for you that are from the book, and additional resources that people can access free from the website, biodiet.org. And if anybody has bought the book on say Amazon or any of the other online retailers, If you like the book, I would just please, in order to help me advocate, if you could provide a review of the book on there. There's a couple up there that are just fantastic. There's a woman I've never met who's a physician in Minnesota who bought the book, and just, she just said, this is, every student in medical school should be reading this. And I was almost in tears. I was just going, that's exactly why I wrote this.
Yeah, just a little Amazon pump, hint. For those of us that sell on Amazon, reviews are gold, absolute gold, and they mean everything, especially when you're smaller, and especially when you're first starting out. Like, it is so important. So yeah, if you guys could please review. If you bought the book, please review, because it really means a lot.
And I should mention, this is self-published. So we paid for the whole thing up front, and it doesn't look like a self-published book, but it is.
No.
So we don't have the same resources as a big publisher to get, advertising. We're paying for all that ourselves, and we have some really great people we're working with to help doing that. But a lot of it is on social media. So just an opportunity to talk to you and your group, Leta, is fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Well, and this is just such a benefit for us. Like, I'm just taking a quick look over here. So, like, I'm not Oprah, and I'm not like, I don't even know if I have everything set up. I'm just so glad to see some people commenting, because I was like, oh my gosh, I hope it's actually on here. I see Eric and Sandra and Nir and Maya and Lisa. So that's great. So there's some people on,
fantastic.
But they'll pop on as it comes on, and then we'll also have the replay, and I will post it on all of my social media platforms as well. So it's going to get out there for sure.
And for those folks that are tuned in live, feel free to just fire away with questions. I'm happy to answer your questions during, or we can at the end. I'm happy to stay on at the end.
And answer whenever you want. And then if I see something pertinent to exactly what you're saying, I'll maybe just interrupt a little bit and ask you. And then some of we can stay to the end too. So just pop in your questions if anything.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, so I do, like, as I said at the beginning, I do have some notes here. So I'm just gonna go down here because I wanted to ask you. The thing I really love, one of the many things that I absolutely love about your book, is how you sort of graduate people into this. Because, for people who have been living their lifestyle of heavy carbs, possibly a lot of not good healthy foods, and then when you start something like this, it's such a shock. It's just, oh my gosh, and it's overwhelming and kind of emotional, because a lot of us have emotional connections to eating. So yours goes into phases. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, just, in general, how the phases go, because I think it's so important, because then it really does become your lifestyle.
Yeah, you said that so well too. I mean, food, people are emotional about food. There's cultural value to food. A lot of these cultural things are around holidays, and they involve a lot of sweet foods and very high carb, high glycemic index foods. So adapting it's partly a lifestyle. It is a lifestyle change. But from a metabolic perspective, it is a significant, use the word shock to your system. I think that's a fair comment. And so what I realized, one of the things that's a little bit different about the BioDiet from some of the other ketogenic diet related books is this easing into it. So what I've found when I've been counseling people over the last 10 years, is that some people do okay with kind of a cold turkey, and you can do it. I have advice in BioDiet about how to do it cold turkey, but I found more successful in alleviating the symptoms of the keto flu, which is a common side effect during the adaptation phase we can talk about, but just also that lifestyle change. You need some time to do that. So and the time limits are not fixed. This is not a totally prescriptive book. You can adapt it to what works for you. But the 5 phases are generally, the first one is an assessment phase. It's called bioassessment. I have bio in front of all the 5 phases. That's why it's called BioDiet. Yeah. So the bioassessment is where you actually do some physical measurements of yourself to see what, you need a starting point to see if the diet's working for you. And we generally recommend about a 1 season or 12-week intervention to start with.
Baseline to start.
Yeah, you got your baseline, and there's some very simple, pretty cool measurements. There's some new ones people probably haven't heard about that are a lot better than BMI. And then also going to your physician, getting a full, lipid panel, the blood work done, so your blood sugar, your blood pressure, your lipids are at the start. You can also consider things like a DEXA scan, which is women do for bone scans, for bone density. It also tells you your fat content, but where your fat is, and it's that mid-abdominal fat.
It's funny, I've been looking for that myself, actually, and it's not easy to find. At least in my town, it's not. Maybe in Vancouver or something it is, but here I can't find to get that scan. So I'm not sure you do that.
It's I just had it. I guess asked my physician, and I get a referral. I went to the hospital and did it, and you pay yourself. It's about $120 or something like that.
So I'm guessing that maybe a little bit more resources, but still probably be worth traveling if a person had to, because I think that's a really great measure to see where you're
or
at.
check around with some of the private health providers might have a DEXA scan. Some of the universities even have them for research, but they're not unusual. Yeah. And then that's the first step is getting that baseline, and also determining, like, ketogenic diets are not for everybody. They'll probably work for about 7 out of 8 people, but that 1 out of 8, there could actually be some concerns there. So you need to.
For the 2 to 3 people, maybe.
Yeah. So in the bioassessment phase, I talk about some of the conditions for which you should not be on a ketogenic diet. Unfortunately, they're very rare. Genetic disorders about carnitine, metabolism, and so on, porphyria, and some conditions like that. And then there are some drugs which you should not be taking if you're on ketogenic. And there are even some genes.
Think of any?
SLGT2 inhibitors, which are one of the blood sugar inhibitors. You should not be on those and on a ketogenic diet. And again, a lot of people with diabetes just do this and they don't consider that. So it's a very important consideration. And then there are some conditions for which it could be okay, but we're not sure yet, like type 1 diabetes. When I say we're not sure, I'm not a medical doctor, but you have to discuss whether it's appropriate for you. So this would be people with kidney disorders or disease, or maybe kidney transplants, or people with liver problems. And then there are some conditions which you need your physician's advice, which would be if you're breastfeeding, for example, you need to have physician approval of that.
Now, and so. Very specific though, like, I mean, when you say these people should be on a ketogenic diet in the sense of making ketones, being in it, but you could still eat this way and still have those conditions. I mean, really, you're just cutting out a lot of refined carbohydrates, but maybe just not as severely to get into ketosis. Is that the difference between?
Yeah, I think you put that pretty well. I think, Leta, like ketosis is a specific, very low carbohydrate metabolic conversion, and it takes some time for those genes and metabolic pathways to be activated, which is why some people experience this keto flu. But yeah, I think everybody. Listen, the North American diet is about 50% of calories are from highly processed foods, and they're just not good for you. And about 25% of those calories are from sugar. And half of sugar is fructose, which is a known hepatotoxin. So we have a lot of conversations about organic food and GMO-free food and gluten-free. And I go, yeah, but if you're eating a Western diet, like 1/8 of your calories are from poison, like a known hepatotoxin. So don't worry about this other stuff. Get sugar out of your diet. Get the highly refined foods out of your diet, including seed oils, by the way. Vegetable oils from seeds. The cotton, linseed oil and cotton oil, they're cheap. Canola, I don't believe those are necessarily healthy for people. Replace them with healthy fats like olive oil, macadamia oil, and so on.
Avocado oil.
Yeah. So yes, everybody I think would benefit from getting processed food, highly processed, highly refined food out of their diet, and especially with sugar. Yeah.
For sure.
And then those for whom it's appropriate. And again, the reason I say 7 out of 8 people is that's just a rough number. But if you also look in the United States right now, 3/4 of American adults, that's 18 and over, are either overweight or obese. So presumably, because the ketogenic diet is the best diet to reduce body fat, and the BioDiet is especially formulated to be a nutritionally complete diet. So we call that a well-formulated ketogenic diet.
That's what I love about it. It's so amazingly healthy. It's just absolutely love that, because there's cheaty keto. And I'm not saying that I don't ever do cheaty keto. Okay. Everybody knows that I like my Halo once in a while and other things, but anyway,
cheaty keto. Yeah. Cheaty keto shortens to Cheeto. So that'll tell you what I think of cheating on ketogenic diets. Actually, there's a lot of myths I talk about. One of those myths is anything in moderation, and really diet is such a slippery slope. People are really not that mindful about what they eat. They generally just get hungry and they go and they eat something that tastes good, that fills them up, and that's our problem. Is we're not being mindful about food. We're not eating real food. And by the way, one of the myths I like to dispel is that a ketogenic diet is necessarily bacon and eggs 3 times a day.
Yes.
You know, I eat bacon and eggs once or maybe twice a week. Yeah, no, it's not. Most of what I eat is vegetable. So when people say, oh, you know, you should eat a plant-based diet, I said you can eat a plant-based diet and have it ketogenic. It's a challenge to be completely like vegan, but vegetarian for sure. If you want to eat eggs and cheese and dairy and nuts and stuff, a vegetarian diet can be ketogenic for sure. But yeah, I just want to reemphasize the fact that there are some people for whom a ketogenic diet is not appropriate, and only your physician can help you determine that, which is why it's important to go and see your physician and talk about it and let them know.
Since you're saying that, I just want to interrupt to say, like, and find the right physician, because I hear this all the time where people say, oh, I went to my doctor and I told him I'm doing this, and he said, no, you shouldn't do that. Well, that's one doctor's opinion. And as you said, how many hours do they get of nutritional education? Like 8 hours?
5 to 8, yeah.
Well, exactly.
I can tell you why that is.
I think a naturopathic doctor would be better, or possibly even a dietitian, depending on what their scope is. But I do think that you got to find the right person. I don't mean find the right person to tell you what you want to hear. I just mean find the right person that's educated, that actually understands what this is about.
I can tell you why that is, because one of the things that I've done over my career is I've taught the physiology to people who go on to medical school. And the one thing they learn, and this is why I've actually branded BioDiet rather than putting anything keto in the title, because what physicians learn is that one of the consequences of end stage or severe diabetes is something called ketoacidosis. And ketoacidosis is absolutely life-threatening. It can cause you to go into coma and die. And one of the dangers of being diabetic, of course. Now that's what sticks in their head. They hear keto and they think ketoacidosis, they think diabetic coma. And then I've heard that. Yeah. Now, so the level of ketone is like anything else. If you have the right amount of calcium in your blood, it's perfect. But it's a very narrow range between 9 and 11 milligrams per milliliter for calcium. So more calcium isn't better. In fact, it would kill you. So less calcium is better. So everything is regulated within a range. Now, a low level of ketones in your system is quite a normal state. In fact, it probably happens to most people every night. But you can actually increase that by decreasing your carbohydrate intake. And at that point, there's not only all the benefits you talked about in terms of feeling great and losing weight, but it's a very powerful signaling hormone that does all kinds of wonderful things in your body that really, your brain works better, your heart prefers that as a fuel, your brain prefers it as a fuel, your muscles will use it as a fuel. And so the ketones, they're being burned all the time. But so what's happening is you're reducing the amount of glucose you need in your blood, and you're replacing that essentially almost one for one with beta hydroxybutyrate, which is the key ketone. We call it BHB in short. And I know one of your products is the BHB oral supplement. That's a great one. I use that. We talked about the easing in process. So what I counsel people to do is to start taking MCT oil during that phase between the assessment and the hardcore stop eating carbohydrates. I just get them to cut sugar and alcohol out of their diet, and then I get them to add in MCT oil. And the reason for that is to start getting your body used to the presence of something that should have been there all along, but wasn't in appreciable amounts, and now it's going to be. And that'll trigger those enzymatic pathways to allow you to alleviate some of the symptoms of the keto flu.
That is such a good point. Like just easing in and adding these things, or taking some things out, adding some things in, and you're just getting your body used to it. I love that, because so many people struggle. I have to do all these things. I don't know all the rules. What are all the things? And it's really overwhelming for a lot of people. And I think yours transitions them in perfectly.
It's a guide, right? It's a guide. It's a guide for not just for individuals, but it's a guide. Take this into your doctor's office and just say, listen, have you read this book? Because it's a guide for physicians and as well as patients. Now, the
doctors love that, but my doctor loves that. Oh yeah. I've gone in with a few different things, and he's loved it. So I mostly see my naturopathic doctor on things like that. So I go to my regular doctor for testing. I guess you just have to feel out your doctor, but you got to try. I mean, a lot of them are coming around, so it's worth a shot, right? Yeah,
and so the Canadian Clinicians for Therapeutic Nutrition, there's I think almost 6,000 members now, and most of them are physicians. So that's how many. And this is a low carb. It's not specifically keto. It's low carb, high fat. And so there are thousands of physicians across Canada that are now using it. And the reason why is that it actually helps people get better rather than just managing a disease that's progressing like type 2 diabetes. Remember, with type 2 diabetes, there are no drugs that reverse type 2 diabetes. They only slow an inevitable premature death, with all kinds of other complications. But a ketogenic diet will. About 94% of people can reduce their medication. I'm just talking about diabetes here. 94% can reduce their medication. 64%, I think that's the right number, 64% will actually reverse their diabetes, which means they no longer need to take medication and their blood sugar is being controlled naturally because remember, there are no essential carbohydrates. Your body makes its glucose as needed, ad libitum we say, in the liver through a process that's called gluconeogenesis, making new glucose, and it makes it as needed. So when you regulate that the production of glucose, you moderate the insulin, and all of the chronic disease, I shouldn't say all of it, 70% of chronic disease is related to obesity, insulin resistance, and inflammation, as we were talking about earlier. And I call these the axis of illness, right? You know, remember the George Bush axis of evil. So I call it the axis of illness. And it's a very simple model. Those three things, if you can do something to reduce insulin resistance, obesity, and inflammation, then those chronic diseases, you'll either prevent them from happening or you'll be able to reduce the effects of them and maybe even return yourself to perfect health again or optimal health.
Well, and that's honestly, we could do a full Facebook Live.
Just that.
in this group alone, because it's hard because we don't always talk about it at the same time. And I haven't screenshotted, every one, but there has been so many conversations, so many posts of people, exactly that, type 1, type 2, insulin resistance, whatever. And there are people that are no longer on medication at all. And a lot of them were lifetimers. I mean, they had been on medication for their whole life and they've completely reversed it. Not just, a lot of them have improved for sure, but completely reversed. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy exciting. I just get every time someone posts something like that, I get so giddy because the weight loss is wonderful. It really, really, and it does, obviously it connects to diabetes. But when you hear about these illnesses being reversed, when do you ever hear about these things being reversed? Do you know what I mean? Like in this day and age with, you can medicate and you can, mask it and everything, but to actually reverse something naturally. Yeah. Crazy.
You're absolutely right. And, drug companies work on this all the time. They've gotten nowhere on it. And there's a premise in philosophy called Occam's razor. And essentially Occam's razor says, don't look for a more complicated theory until you've rejected a simpler theory. And so let's think about that for a while. Let's say you have type 2 diabetes and you go to your physician will say, well, your blood sugar is too high, so I'm going to recommend this medication. Let's say it's metformin. That will reduce your blood sugar. And then they monitor your blood sugar and your blood sugar is lower. So they feel this is having a therapeutic effect. And this is our management system. We don't have a healthcare system. We have a disease management system. And then so the question, and they would say, okay, but the disease is still going to progress and you're going to have to take more medication and probably get on insulin at some point. But let's ask the question, let's see, I'm a design thinker. That's another one of the hats I wear is design thinking, innovation. And so one of the tricks there is the 5 whys. Okay, so why is your blood sugar high? Well, your blood sugar is high because you're insulin resistant. Oh, okay. Why am I insulin resistant? Well, you're insulin resistant because over the years, your insulin levels have been so high that your cells are now becoming kind of deaf to that insulin signal. And so then the body has to produce more insulin to have the same effect, and that makes them more deaf. So over time, you become insulin resistant, and then your blood sugar isn't controllable. Well, why are we insulin resistant? Well, we're insulin resistant, because why do we have these high insulin levels all the time? Well, insulin's released when you have sugar in your blood because you've just eaten a lot of sugar. And then you go, okay, well, why am I eating a lot of sugar? Well, that's what's recommended. So everybody should be eating a lot of, and when I say sugar, by the way, all carbohydrate turns to sugar in the blood. The rest of it is fiber that stays in the digestive system, or the soluble fiber, which gets converted into fats. But so then the answer is, okay, instead of just managing this blood sugar issue, why don't we just not eat the carbohydrate and see what happens? And that's, you know what, it's only recently we've done that. And great, even private sector organizations like Virta Health have been spending a lot on the research to show that if you just get sugar out of people's diets and get that starchy food out of their diets, for most people, type 2 diabetes, it will resolve. And it's the science says for most people, your insulin resistance improves by about 75% within 4 weeks. And this is very typical what we see. Some people completely reverse diabetes type 2 that they've had for years in as little as 3 days. We've seen some people, and that's very rare, but 3 days, all of a sudden they don't need their medication anymore.
that is just incredible. Like
Eating food.
So exciting. Yeah,
so
it really is so exciting. And another thing too that diabetes would say would be the most prevalent talked about in the group. But second to that is cholesterol. Yeah. I find that to be a very confusing topic. I'm certainly don't know a lot about it. I've never had a problem, either way. So it's nothing I really looked at to myself. But just understanding, how does it work with the ketogenic diet and statin drugs and, all this stuff. I mean, if you could clarify it all about the whole cholesterol thing, and I think it made people feel a little bit better too, eating keto.
How much time do you have? Because the thing is,
we could do another whole one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we could, but you know what? And again, I'm not a physician, so I hesitate to talk about drugs. That's the physician's world. But I can tell you, and there is some in one of, there's actually quite a bit in here, and I had to kind of fight to keep it in BioDiet about cholesterol. Towards the end, there's some FAQs, and I anticipated that people would be concerned about it. There are about 5 to 8% of people actually experience an increase in LDL, and LDL is the one biomarker that physicians look at in terms of high cholesterol. They look at your overall cholesterol, which is HDL, LDL, and some triglycerides. Right. And then they use this free, actually, you know what? They measure HDL and they measure triglycerides, but the LDL is actually derived from something called a Friedewald equation, and it depends on how much triglyceride is in your system and so on. Okay. So, and people that are ketogenic, they tend to have very low triglycerides, which is a good thing because that's what you're burning. That's the triglycerides are the fats that you're burning. Right. And so as you're burning them, of course, they're much lower in your system. Yeah. And because of that lower triglyceride level, it gives you a kind of an artificially high LDL. Reading that isn't actually now. So generally we talk about LDL being bad cholesterol and HDL being good cholesterol. Yeah. So HDL goes around and collects cholesterol from the body where it can be causing problems, excessive cholesterol in the blood and the cells. By the way, you need cholesterol. It's part of all animal cells. It's part of our membranes and so on. It's what's used to synthesize all the hormones like cortisone and all the sex hormones and so on. Cholesterol is not a bad thing. It's a necessary thing. But the HDL takes the excess away and takes it back to the liver. So HDL is kind of like a housekeeper that goes and cleans up the mess and takes it back. So you want your HDLs to be higher. Higher is generally better. LDLs are a bit of a different case because LDLs do the opposite. They take it from the stores and they put it into, sorry, my phone just rang there. And it's taken into the, excuse me, I'm just hoping my wife picks that up. And I think she has, good. So the LDLs are taking it from the stores into the cells where they're being used, and if there's too much LDL in the system, then there's too much in your blood, and that's what they're measuring. Now, there's actually 3 different types of LDLs. There's very low density LDLs, the so-called light fluffy LDLs. There's the intermediate, and then there's the small particle LDL. And we don't measure any of those in Canada. We just measure total LDL. So in Canada, you don't know, and only the small one correlates with cardiovascular disease. So one of the things that happens on a ketogenic diet is that you are burning fats, and the VLDLs are the main. You think of it as trucks to carrying, from the farm to the plate. So the VLDLs are carrying those healthy fats to the cells, like your muscle cells and the heart and brain, to be burned. And so you need more of that when you're on a ketogenic diet because it's doing more work. But over time, those can turn into small particle LDLs, and those are the ones that are not beneficial. So really, to get a true measure, and if you're in Canada, you need to go to the United States, and you need to know not just the concentration, which is the LDL-C, but LDL-P, which is the particle number, and that will give you a better view of things. But what also happens on the great thing, and that's okay. So that's what physicians are concerned about, is that LDL. Right.
Temporary bump. Like I get mine tested, and it did in the first 6 months or so. Mine did go up. Like my good cholesterol went up, but also my bad cholesterol went up. But then after 6 months, it just kind of went back to where it was before, which was within what they call, perfect range. And my good cholesterol is like through the roof good, and then my bad is just, where it should be, kind of thing. So it just worked itself out. And
that's what I see, especially with women. Is okay, so if your HDL and your LDL are going up, your total cholesterol is going up. So then your physician will say, okay, your cholesterol's out of range. So then is it the LDL or the HDL? Because, one or better is great for HDL, and the measurements used in Canada. my wife's at like 3. I'm at like 2.2 or something. So I've seen that dramatically go up, which is great. The other thing is your triglycerides are very low. So people are now looking at other markers like the ratio of HDL to triglyceride as a better predictor, because I'm not a physician, so I'm not, I want people to discuss this with their physician, but half of people that have cardiovascular accidents, these are strokes and heart attacks, have absolutely normal cholesterol.
Yes.
So if we were going to start from scratch and look for a marker that was going to predict that, we wouldn't be using LDL cholesterol. We'd do something else.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Sorry.
So there's also the ApoA, ApoB ratio, which are the specific types of lipoproteins that are in those LDLs. And it does get complicated. I suggest people go ahead and read the book. There are some great YouTube videos as well. There's one, and I wish I could remember his name. It starts with an S. It's from Low Carb Down Under. So if you were to put in your browser, Low Carb Down Under, cholesterol, I can't remember his name now. It's like Sakaris or something like that. Yeah, maybe one of the listeners will know about that. He gives a really good PowerPoint presentation that explains a lot of the cholesterol issues. But what I have seen in
looking at it differently. You know what I mean? Like maybe that will start to evolve and change, because right now they're sticking with it's almost like the food pyramid of the cholesterol. We're just sticking with the same measurements that we've always done, and maybe there's a different way to do it.
Well, there is, but we have to re-educate the medical community, because what a physician does, and by the way, the physician is concerned about your health, and they will do anything. They don't just want to prescribe drugs and get you out of their office. They really do want you to get healthier. That's why so many physicians are now turning to diet to help people get healthy. But they have their standard of care, and the standard of care is dictated by, say, the Canadian Cardiology Society. So they just say, this is the number, this is the range we found, and when somebody's out of that range, this is what you should do. You should recommend a statin if their LDL is out of range. So they're just doing their job. They're just doing their job. Now, as a patient, you don't have to accept that advice. You can talk to another doctor. You can say, I prefer not to use a statin. Is this the way? Yeah, but what's funny is you often say, well, my LDL's high, but I don't want to go on a statin. They'll say, what's your diet like? Well, I need a ketogenic diet. And I say, well, you got to get rid of that saturated fat. The saturated fat is one of the things that's raising your HDL. There's 3 things that raise HDL. One is alcohol, one is exercise, and one is eating saturated fat. And so all of those things are good. Alcohol in moderation, okay, like a glass of wine or 2 a day, depending on your size. Okay,
well, you just branched into a whole other subject here. I was going to save it for the end, but...
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, well, because I'm looking at the time, too. It's like, oh, my gosh, it's already... We could sit here for like 2 days and just talk. I mean, this is just amazing. But there were 2 things that I did want to touch on. One was... sometimes it gets a little bit frustrating. I think most of us are doing the ketogenic diet for health. Absolutely. But sometimes the weight loss, it's not always, in our favor. Sometimes we stall, whatever. Are there any tips or anything that you can tell us, like besides going through all the phases in your book and doing, but when you get to that point where you say, okay, I feel like I am doing everything right. So is there a little tweak or something, or maybe for me, maybe for my particular body, I need to look at adjusting this? Are there any things that you think of?
I love what you just said, Leta, for my particular body, because everybody's going to respond differently. So what I have in my book is very approachable and engaging, very short for the original. I've written this book about 4 times.
I want to say that too. Sorry if I didn't say it at the very beginning. So he's like, I'm just going to say like super geeky science. I just backtrack. We were at a keto conference together. And I mean, he could totally geek out like the crazy, but he speaks in everyday language. And that's in his book. That's what I really love so much about his book.
Because my wife is the co-author.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Dale. Yes, you too. And I just love it. And so anyways, I'm sorry I keep on interrupting you, but like, there's just so many great things to talk about you in the book, and I just want to get it in there because it's just so awesome. But so you were saying. Okay, I interrupted you so much that now you don't know what you were saying. We were saying about if they're in the book, we were talking about transitioning in, but then when you get to that point.
Okay, so the first point is everybody's going to react differently. This is why it really helps to get somebody who has expertise in nutritional counseling to help you. Diet Doctor is a pretty good site, and they now have a list of physicians globally that are aware of low carb, high fat diets. The Canadian Clinicians for Therapeutic Nutrition, I think it's ccnt.ca is their website. I'm on their scientific advisory board. They're providing a list of physicians that can help with this. But there's also, when you get into registered dietitians, it depends, because some of them only want to work through their scope of practice, which is the Canada Food Guide. That's sometimes a challenge. And nutritional counselors, because they're not regulated, it's quite variable. So that's why I say find a good one, word of mouth or whatever you can do. Don't ask me. I do that too. But you can probably find somebody a lot less expensive than me, because what I do is, most of the work I do is pro bono with women with breast cancer. So that's the first thing, is it's not one size fits all, and people react differently. We do address what happens for people that stall in the process. And, generally, and it's also, people ask me, well, what if I want to do fasting, or what if I want to do vegan or whatever? I said, listen, if you're losing weight and you're overweight or obese and you're losing weight, whatever's working for you, go with that. And one of the things, the very simple principles about people who are overweight or obese that are trying to lose weight, is whatever you do to get back to that weight, you have to do that for the rest of your life. So that's why I really emphasize, this is a lifestyle change. It's not a 12-week get into your bikini and look good in the summer thing. It's a lifestyle change that's intended to be permanent. But because of that, some people do stall. Not everybody's weight just goes steadily down. Some people go like this, and they go like this, and they go like this, and they go like this. Usually what we talk about in the book, and it's quite detailed for a short conversation, is about 4 or 5 different tricks you can do to kind of just shake it up a bit and identify what it is that's causing that pause in weight loss. But I would also I would encourage people not to focus just on weight loss. Look at those other biomarkers, get their blood work done, and see how they feel. The one thing I've counseled hundreds of people, not thousands like Dr. Eric Westman at Duke University, but hundreds of people. 100% of them, people use that phrase, 100% of them have all said, I just feel better. And if that's the only thing that people have, and they get sugar out of their life, and they just feel better, then I call that a win. And I'm not really that concerned if they're losing weight, right?
Yeah, I know. I say the same thing. It's hard because a lot of people, especially, when they first join in a keto group or whatever, that's their main concern, is the losing weight. But a lot of them have said, that was what I first joined, and that's why I first started thinking about. And then they changed as time went on, and they realized, I had no idea I could feel this good. I had no idea I could have this kind of energy. I had no idea that my health could improve in so many ways. Oh, wait, I lost 5 pounds. Perfect. It's kind of like, it comes out, kind of afterwards. But I think it's like you have to feel it before you get it. That's how I feel. Because just telling somebody how it's going to be, they don't really know until they're actually in it. So it's this little cult that we're in. And once you're in it and you feel it, then you realize that it is a lifestyle and we're going to do it forever.
And I think at the we talked about the first 2 stages are the assessment, and then the preparation, and then there's the adaptation phase, which is usually a couple of weeks. That's where you have some side effect experiences. Probably best to do a whole episode on that. And then the rejuvenation part of it is the rest of the 12 weeks. And I call it rejuvenation because you really do biologically wind back the clock. And there's even some evidence that there's some epigenetic changes that actually improve telomere length and that sort of thing. And then the last one is continuation. So what do you do at the end of the 12 weeks? I hope people just stay with it. But we talk about transitioning to a low-carb diet. What I don't recommend is you go on and off a ketogenic diet, because it's, as you say, it's quite a shock to your system. I'm not a big fan of 5 and 2 fasting, eat normal 5 days a week and fast for 2, or vice versa, for that same reason.
Well, you know what? I'm going to ask you, I do see a couple of questions in the group.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
But I'm going to ask you one thing, a little bit personal, but alcohol. We often talk in the group about, what are some appropriate things, and we certainly don't want to, pop right out of our ketogenic diet, but we do like a drink from time to time. And do you have any advice on that?
Generally, alcohol is outside of beer, because beer is liquid bread.
Beer is, beer is
now,
liquid.
Yeah, so I love beer, so I had to quit drinking beer. I lost 27 pounds of fat, by the way, in the 12 weeks when I designed this diet back, 8 or so years ago. My wife and I were the first to do it because I wanted to do it to myself first and see what happened. And we were so pleased. But I lost 27 pounds of fat. My wife lost about 15 pounds of that, sort of that midsection, and we're both middle-aged. So that was great to see. But we love wine. In fact, it's great being down in Oregon and all those great Pinots they have down there. So
wine drinkers in this group.
Yeah, fermentation is a good thing. Fermentation turns sugar into alcohol, and alcohol doesn't have the same. In fact, alcohol, and especially wine, seems to have a positive effect on insulin sensitivity. So, and Dr. Eric Westman.
White, is white kind of has more sugar, or does that not really matter in this case?
Some of the wines, they'll actually tell you what the residual sugar is. So you should try and find dry wines. So never drink sweet wines. White's actually a little better than red. And we talk about this in BioDiet as well. But there's still like 4 to 6 grams. So as long as you're not going crazy, and typically,
crazy, I think we need to make it, define what don't go crazy is, because
okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. So generally what's considered healthy and I study, breast cancer research. So for increase, so you don't want to increase your risk of breast cancer, which increase with alcohol.
Right.
So generally for women, probably a 5-ounce glass of wine a day is fine. And for men, let's say 2. I'm not talking about ketosis. I'm just talking about other health.
Right. But if we just counted that as part of our carbs, is that what we would do? Just
counts as your carbs, And again, I don't actually. You can if you want to, but I don't necessarily recommend counting carbs too much because some people get obsessed with that, and so I don't count.
I know. I know.
So with the BioDiet, you don't count carbs, you don't count calories. I give you a whole menu of or a whole list of grocery items, and just eat that stuff, and you'll be fine. As long as you ensure. One of the things, sort of getting back to women that are stalling, often if it's women that are stalling in weight loss, it's because they're not eating enough fat. So they're actually getting into a hypocaloric state, which actually lowers your metabolism, and that's the struggle. So one of the things you say is just go for it with the butter, the grass-fed butter and the olive oil.
I know there's a lot of people. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. It sounds like it stopped on my end, and then I hear you still talking. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people. let me finish that story. So I know a lot of people will say. Sorry, you see, this is what happens. Like we can't coordinate it. They'll say, reach your protein macros, really watch your carbs, and eat your fat, use fat as a lever. And maybe it depends on the person. That doesn't work for me. I will just say, because I do test myself a lot. I have a glucose meter, blood glucose meter, and I also have a ketosis meter. And so I test myself because I just want to see, what's happening when I eat certain things. Every single time I have enough fat or more, I do amazing. And every time I let it go down, I don't. So for my body, I need that extra fat. Now, maybe other people are different. I don't know.
It's not extra fat. I mean, you should be getting 65, 70% of your calories from fat. So there's a lot of fat in there. Now that's, if you think of how much fat that is a day, for someone my size, I'm about 150 pounds, that amount of fat to be 70% of my calories on, say, 2,000 calories a day is only about 2/3 of a cup of olive oil. It's not that much fat because remember, there's no water in there.
Well, try drinking 2/3 of a cup of olive oil.
Yeah, but you wouldn't do it all at once. You'd get it in the meat, the dairy, the cheese, the butter, the oil, your MCT oil.
I'm a good 80%. I strive. I always, and that's what people say is that, you don't have to meet any target. But I guess that's what I was trying to say is that when I kind of willy-nilly it and I'm not really tracking, which a lot of times I don't, honestly, because the emotional connection to the tracking kind of drives me crazy. So I only do it when I'm doing experiments and testing. But I noticed that if I am at least 75%, even leaning towards 85%, that's the sweet spot for me. Yeah, so keeping carbs really low and the fat really high, and then meeting my protein, that's a sweet spot for me. So I guess, everyone has to test, see what works.
Well, that gets back to the alcohol thing too. One of the good things about working in these labs is we have a sort of unlimited access to test our own ketones. I'm very solid all the time, but actually it turns out I can have a Guinness and it doesn't actually affect my ketones at all.
Oh, wow.
But I only drink one of those a year on my birthday. So back to alcohol, distilled spirits like Scotch is particularly good because it doesn't seem to budge ketones at all. So Scotch is not going to knock you out of ketones. A Scotch or two. I'm not a Scotch drinker, but and again, in moderation. Vodka probably on its own. It's what you mix it with that's going to create the problems.
Just water.
Wine a glass to a day. Now the science from the what was it called? The PrediMed study showed that you can drink about 350 mils of wine a day without any adverse health effects if your diet, your exercise, otherwise health. That's about a half a bottle each. So it's a couple of glasses each. So yeah, if you're sharing a bottle of wine,
a really great contest that we could have in the group. We'll get our
ketone meters out
and we'll start drinking, and we'll say every 30 minutes, let's do a test ourselves and show our numbers and just see where we're at. That could be pretty fun, actually.
Yeah. The other trick with alcohol, of course, is alcohol impairs your judgment. So that's why I don't encourage. I get people to cut alcohol out entirely during the adaptation phase, because if you have that one drink, even though it's got only a little bit of carbs, suddenly that piece of pizza that's sitting there in the fridge looks pretty good, totally. and so I encourage people to abstain. But after the adaptation phase, then I actually encourage people, as long as there's no alcohol and alcoholism in their family and they're not operating any machinery or driving, to enjoy a glass of wine a day, I think is really good. And BC's got some fantastic wines, as does,
yes, we do.
Oregon, California. Nice. Yeah. So
I just want to say, if there's anybody that has a question, just pop it in right now. And I'm going to read one that's here. CJ asked, how much MCT oil should we be having daily? Like, is there a limit or anything like that with MCT oil?
Again, it depends. There are 5 phases in the BioDiet. I encourage MCT oil for the first 2 steps. The first week actually, it's the second step is a week or so. And start with a teaspoon a day. Now, I've tried your MCT, the intentionally bare MCT oil. It's great. And what I love about your MCT oil is its caprylic acid, which is the C8. And you need to find... Yeah, if you're going to use an MCT oil, you need C8, and there's nothing wrong with C10 or C12, but they're more anti-inflammatory and they have a coconutty flavor and so on, which some people don't like. But pure C8 is what you want, because that converts 100% into ketones in your system. So that's the one you want, and your intentionally bare product is I've looked at that. I've tried it. In fact, I got it in my tea right now. It mixed quite well, and has no scent and no flavor, and you can put it in your protein shakes or whatever. So it's great. So start with a teaspoon a day. The reason I say start with a little bit is some people have some pretty dramatic intestinal reactions, if you know what I'm talking about.
We've heard some really good stories in the group about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have like a couple tablespoons full and then go on an hour drive to work where there's no rest stops on the way. You might find some. You'll very quickly adapt to that, and so. Dr. Stephen Cunnane, who you might have seen recently on CTV, because he's doing the research on MCT oil, exogenous MCT oil, which is what we call it outside the body. It's not being the ketones are exogenous; they're from your food rather than from your liver. They're produced naturally, it was on CTV. So Stephen Cunnane, it's Cunnane. Stephen with the PH. He's at University of Sherbrooke, and he studies MCT oil and its therapeutic benefits for people with mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's, and getting some amazing results there. Wow. So if you're using it as a therapeutic there, the maximum there is 2 tablespoons a day. They do it in 2 separate doses. 2 tablespoons all at once, you'd probably have some issues.
2 tablespoons in their study, or you're saying we should only have 2 tablespoons a day, or do you mean for their study that they were doing?
In their study, they found that 2 tablespoons a day, which is 30 mils a day, was a limit for most people's tolerance. And again, it's basically, you need to go to
that every day.
Yeah. But no. See, once you're used to it, you can get more. Now, in terms of the ketones in your system, this is the oil, the caprylic acid. But in terms of your system, once you're keto adapted, you're producing 50 to 100 grams a day from your liver, from the conversion. And so the exogenous ketones may or may not have a beneficial effect. I still use them all the time anyway. I put them in my shakes when I go to the gym. I find it makes me a little brighter. By the way, the Navy SEALs use this. They use MCT oil plus butter in their coffee, and those guys have to be super hyper, situational awareness. So it does. I find it brightens my brain a little bit, which is why I had some before this interview today. And but I would say start with a teaspoon, and then see how that goes, and then work your way up to a tablespoon a day. And I would say a maximum for most people would be about 2 tablespoons in 2 separate doses per day.
But it's almost, I almost think of it like food. It'd be like saying, well, how much butter should you have a day, or how much, whatever. I think of it like a food. So I want to get enough in because I want to get my fats. Plus the health benefits of MCT oil is so great. But I don't know if CJ was meaning like, should we strive for a certain amount, in order to get the benefits cognitive wise and energy wise and ketosis wise, or you just kind of go with how you feel.
We talked about that 2/3 of a cup of oil. So that it's 100% oil. It's a saturated fat. And so, but it converts 100% into ketones in your system. And the ketone is not just, it is a food. It's kind of a, I hate the term, but it's kind of a super fuel for your brain and your heart. They function much better. It's much less inflammatory. So any of the MCT oil that you're eating, it's like the best thing you can put in your system. Because it is a saturated fat that has, and by the way, the BHB, beta-hydroxybutyrate, is a signaling hormone as well within the cells. It does all kinds of wonderful things. In fact, some of the effects of the BHB are similar to the effects of exercise because they upregulate something called AMPK. I'm kind of geeking out on you guys right now, but AMPK seems to be the molecule that is produced during exercise when you deplete your energy stores that has all those beneficial effects afterwards. So it's kind of like getting the benefits of exercise without exercising. So,
what do you think of combining the two? Do you ever do that? Do you ever combine the BHB and the MCT together? Like, I don't know if you would do it like pre-workout or just as an energy.
So I've tried your BHB product as well, and we were using that. Actually, we were doing some hiking up in the mountains in Oregon, and so we had that in our drink. And the reason I put that in our drink, what I really love about that product, is that it has a number of different salts in it. So that kind of, those are called ketone salts. As opposed to the caprylic acid, which converts 100% to ketones in your system, the salts, they have to be absorbed and metabolized. So it's a less effective way to get in there, but it helps. But because you've combined it in that product with magnesium and calcium, I think, and sodium and potassium, you're getting, and that's, I was going to say, one of the side effects that we talk about alleviating in BioDiet is the need for a salt. We have to actually up our salt, and most people aren't getting enough magnesium and enough potassium. So having that combined with BHB in a salt is absolutely wonderful. So I really recommend that as well. I use that, by the way, when I go to the gym. I use that and/or one of the Vega products. They have some pretty good rehydrators for. I just want the salts. By getting a little bit of BHB in with the salts, and it tastes fine, and it's so I would use that in the gym while I was working out too.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I do too. I know there's a lot of people in the group that use it.
What's the sweetener in that?
Stevia.
What's the sweetener in that? Stevia. Okay. Yeah. Stevia's fine. I'm not a big fan of sucralose. I just find it's chemically and I just don't really like it. So Stevia's natural. Yeah.
No, none of our products would have anything like sucralose in it for sure. Yeah. I wouldn't have that. But no, stevia is good. And I actually find with that product, like half dose. I mean, I tried doing the full one and I was already like, amped up on my normal ketones as it was and my oil and everything. And then I had a full dose. I mean, I was bouncing. I would not jittery or anything, but I just mean like, I didn't need it all. I mean, honestly, half a scoop was actually just more than enough. And I felt really great just on half a scoop. So I usually tell people to start with that. But
that's what I did too.
Did you half a scoop? Yeah. And then so actually Near, who's on right now, he mixes all together. He takes the bone broth powder and the MCT oil powder and the keto BHB, and he puts them all together. And that's like his favorite drink. It's like fills him up, gives him protein, gives him energy. That's like his superfood. He calls it a superfood. So that's another way to do it.
Sounds good to me.
I'm just going to see if there's any other questions. Everyone's so quiet today. Boy, in the group, I can't get you guys to stop talking. And now
I'm
I
just
don't see
looking
any.
through the notes you sent me too. I think we've covered most of the things here.
I think we did. Honestly,
you know, I could talk a little bit just to finish up about the cancer research that we're doing.
That would be great.
Yeah, I can't talk specifically too much about the trial because it's mid-phase, but it's a 3-year trial to look at the therapeutic benefits of ketogenic diet, like the BioDiet, a well-formulated ketogenic diet for women with therapeutic breast cancer. So what we're doing, this is at the BC Cancer Research Center Terry Fox Lab with Dr. Jerry Crystal. We're doing the immunohistochemistry. So by the way, this is the most fantastic, complete study I've ever been involved with, and we're measuring everything. We have digital PET scans, we're doing blood draws, we're actually doing tissue samples, and we're working in collaboration with Dr. Jeff Volek, who some of your listeners will be familiar with. Jeff Volek and Steve Finney have been a pretty powerful team in this space for a long time. Wonderful guys, super nice, very supportive. Jeff's got an amazing team of super bright people there at the Ohio State University. And I've been down there a few times visiting with them, and it's just what they've got going there is amazing. So we're recruiting women from the Columbus, Ohio area. Now, I have to say there's a lot of misinformation and sort of over-exaggeration about the benefits of ketogenic diets for cancer. With Dr. Crystal, we're pretty sure that a low-carb or ketogenic diet, low carb or high protein, but as long as it's low carbohydrate, is one of the best ways to prevent getting cancer in the first place. And that's the best place to start, is just don't get it. Very difficult to prove that, but it's more easier to prove that you can have a therapeutic benefit. So, but first thing I'll say is it's absolutely not a cure for cancer. Okay, it's not because the principle is fairly simple. People go, oh, well then, I'm starving the cells of glucose, and I'm starving them of insulin, so the cancer will just go away. No, what we're doing is we're tipping the balance of power in favor of your immune system's ability to kill the cancer, and by limiting that insulin and glucose supply, but also the BHB itself. And then what we've seen in our studies, very preliminary studies, is for those people that comply with a ketogenic diet, they have a much more enhanced immune response when challenged with a viral or bacterial vector, which is a proxy for a cancer cell. So we're actually looking at the individual white blood cells and how they respond to a challenge. So we're seeing that. And I haven't had a sniffle for 7 years, since the first Obama administration on ketogenic diet. My immune system is pretty darn healthy. So that's one thing. It's not a cure. It works best with the standard of care, whatever your physician is recommending. So it's a good adjunct therapy as far as we can tell. There's some preliminary studies with pancreatic cancer. There's some pretty good results with GBH, glioblastoma multiforme. And we're looking now for a study on breast cancer. So all I can say is the preliminary results are really promising in that we're seeing some decrease in tumor mass and improvement health. And by the way, the women in our study are all stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. So these are women that are basically the medical system has said there's nothing more we can do to help you. So even just seeing things moving back in the right direction for a lot of these women from a psychosocial perspective is so powerful, and that also helps too. So really exciting stuff.
You're doing this because it just seems like all of the research is to do with pharmaceuticals, and that's just all you ever hear. And I didn't even realize that things like this were even being done right now. I mean, it's just, I'm really happy about that, because it's such a, I'm not saying, that people shouldn't take whatever treatment that they feel is right, but to study from a food perspective, and especially ketogenic, I just think, why not do that too? Or place of, or whatever you want to do. But I didn't even know that funding and money was being put towards research like this.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because funding is very challenging. We're funded by the John and Lottie Hecht Foundation here in Vancouver to do that study with 20 women in the experimental side and 20 women in the control side over 3 years. We feed them all their food. Not for the 3-year study. The study's 3 years, but that's almost $1 million. It's really expensive to do.
Oh, wow.
Nor the U.S. And Canadian governments will not fund studies on ketogenic nutrition, because it's contrary to what they're recommending, their government recommendations, which are low-fat, high-carb diets. So we have to go to private sources. Fortunately, there are organizations that will fund our research. But when you're looking at very reputable organizations like the BC Cancer Research Center, one of the best research centers in the world. By the way, BC has the best cancer outcomes in the world, and rock star people there, including Dr. Crystal. And you look at the Ohio State University, maybe the biggest university on the planet. There's great people doing great research there, but we still have to get private funding. And this is one of the reasons why I'm advocating for changes to public policy. The Australian government, the New Zealand government, and the US government, and the diabetes associations in those countries are now just recognizing ketogenic diets as or low carb, high fat diets as an option for a therapeutic for that. So things are changing slowly, but we really need. I am an advocate. That's my role here in this in the ecosystem, and that's why I wrote BioDiet, is to open people's eyes. I hope to get. I'm not trying to make any money off this book. It's cheap. It's $20. It's paperback. It's 200 pages, but I want to get into as many hands as possible so that. Yeah, especially decision makers. So if any of your listeners know of, get it to your physician's hands, your representative, your political representative, say, listen, we got to start changing public policy and recognizing that food is a therapeutic to prevent and treat chronic disease. Think of the cost savings there. If you look at diabetes alone, in the U.S., as I told you, 3/4 of Americans, adults, are overweight or obese. Half of American adults are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. And those that are pre-diabetic, half of those will become diabetic. So, and the cost of managing that disease over the 20 or 30 years of its course costs so much that by 2030, the cost of just treating diabetes in the United States will be about $800 billion a year, which is what they're spending, what the Pentagon spends this year. So the United States could potentially bankrupt itself just trying to treat diabetes. Or they'll just let people die because they can't afford to do it, which would be really sad. So think of the cost savings if you just open people's eyes to just get that weight off, get your insulin regulated, get your inflammation down through well-formulated ketogenic diets like the BioDiet. For those, it could save billions, hundreds of billions.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree, and I just can't say enough about.
You're so sweet.
It's like the opposite. It's like when you're backing up a trailer, and you got to do the opposite of the opposite is what I call it. But anyways, I can't.
It's shiny. There's a bit of shiny stuff on there. It's silver and blue. Those are actually azure and argent colors.
But like I said, I just love it. And I have so many areas that are earmarked because I keep going back to the same things again. And I think even if you're a seasoned ketoer and you've been doing it for a long time, you get a few nuggets in here that you didn't see before. Just the way that Dave explains it, just in such easy to understand formulation. And another thing too is, you call it, what'd you call it? I call it the keto cult, and you just called it something. You said the keto,
keto community, ketoverse.
Yeah, you called it something, sounded very classy. Anyway, I always call it the keto cult, but when you're speaking to people and you're trying to tell them how great this is, and all they're hearing is, oh my gosh, all you're doing is eating fat or whatever. This book, give them this book because it's in layman's terms that they can understand, and then maybe they'll come to your way of thinking, kind of thing. So
yeah, anyways, thanks. That's a lot due to Dale's writing ability, and we had another editor, Linda Prusen. So it's a book as much written by women for women as it is by me. And it was a great team effort, and the group at Page 2 that helped us produce it, they were wonderful too. So I really thank you for helping us get the word out, and for the great products that you're helping provide to people to help them through this process. And if people want to get a hold of me, they can just dave@biodiet.org. And on the website, they can order the book, they can preview the book, they can get some of the resources for the book. And you can also contact either Dale or me, Dale at biodiet.org or dave@biodiet.org. Sorry, it might be David at biodiet.org. I should check on if Dave bounces back, it's probably David at biodiet.org.
We'll figure it out, and then I'll make sure I put this in the post when the video gets posted up, just so that people have a way of getting a hold of you if they have questions.
Fantastic.
And you are also in the group, and I don't want to take advantage for sure, because we can be quite chatty in the group. But if once in a while there happens to be a question that I think is very pertinent to your work and your book, is it okay if I tag you? And
you can absolutely. You can absolutely tag me. And listen, I love Kamloops, and I go up there all the time. I got some friends up there at the university and in the tech. In fact, our website, biodiet.org, is hosted in Kamloops at the Kamloops Innovation Center there. Yeah, by Adroit Technologies. Chris Brunsgaard and his team up there. They've been wonderful helping us out. So if there's a group, you want to get a group together, I'm happy to come up there. Yeah. No, I mean like a live group. Yeah. Because it's a short drive for me. And if there's a group, if somebody wants to get a group together and we can come up, we'll bring some books with us. I'd be happy to come up there.
Well, let me tell you, I am actually going to really think about that, Dave, because but I went to my local health food store, and I'm not going to say names or anything, but they brought in someone to talk about keto. Right. I almost walked out. I literally, it was all I could do not to walk out. And I only stayed because there were a couple people there that I knew were getting the wrong information, and I kind of knew them and I wanted to speak to them after. I talked to the two general managers of the store and said, I cannot believe how disappointed I am in this. It was the worst talk ever. By listening to this, nobody would ever do the ketogenic diet. And this person that presented was, no offense to anybody, but she was a vegetarian. So not as easy, right? And she had never done the keto diet. So I would love to have you come in.
Sounds like you need to have some evidence-based discussion though.
Someone who is actually knowledgeable that can talk to people. So you know what? Let me get my thinking cap on and see what I can get going. But I was meeting in this group here. If a question comes up, sometimes, and I know that you can answer it, that'd be really helpful.
Sure. It's a great group you got going there. I follow the conversations. I pipe up every once in a while, but I'm very happy to help out when and where I can. If through all of this, we can just prevent one woman from getting breast cancer, that would be great. That's what my mother died of, breast cancer, when I was young. So I grew up with that. So if it just does that, then I consider that success. But anything I can do to help people, I'd be happy to do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Dave. Thanks so much for coming on. And, I don't see any other questions, so we'll leave it at that, and then we'll put the replay up and everything, and you never know, more questions might come, and then I'll tag you if they do.
Sure, sounds great.
So, and I'll give you a copy of this too, of the video.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Dave. Thanks. Okay. Have a good day. Bye, you guys. Everyone. Thanks everybody for coming. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.